What's up, guys? It's John at National Sports Entertainment, and I wanted to go into something that I found interesting. Just to me, I thought it was interesting. And it's Nick Chubb, and obviously, I just did a video not that long ago, so I hadn't really gone into this, but I immediately thought something was weird when he got injured. And I know a lot of people were like, oh, no, he really got hurt. You know, you could see him crying, and oh man, it was a rough hit. I'll just remind people that every Friday on SmackDown, I see people get walloped in the leg with chairs. I see people's knees getting wrapped around poles. I'm just saying, especially with knee pads, there's a lot of things you can do. Now, not to play the doubter here, because that's not even really the reason I am doing this video. This video is going to go probably in my playlist that's going into what I call the crime of the century. So, to me, what's interesting is what happened when he got hurt. Everybody came out of the woodwork acting like this guy just broke his neck. I understand it's a season-ending injury, but we just had another guy with a season-ending injury, and we got a little bit of love. We did not get this. These guys are acting, they should have been acting like this when Hunter got no pun intended, headhunted. And again, I think that was set up, and that's the reason it was more after the fact. Like the next day, people were putting stuff out. But everybody immediately was like, oh, this is the ugliest thing ever. We're not going to show the replay because of sensitivity. I don't buy that for a second. I don't think they care about our queasy stomachs. I think they care about hiding things. Now, what's interesting is, now, it's a different time, but when Theismann's leg got, pretzeled, and by the way, the highlight is still on YouTube, so obviously they don't care too much, by Lawrence Taylor, there was about 400 replays shown. And with Hunter got hit hard. It was ugly to watch because I think it was set up, but still, it was a injury where he was obviously hit when he wasn't, supposed to be expecting it, and it looked like a hard hit. And they're showing that over and over and over. The same announcers are saying, "Oh, look at this horrible late hit on Sanders. Oh, it's hard to watch, but let's keep showing it over and over and over." But for this injury, there's this knee injury, and I'm not downplaying a knee versus other areas of the body. But it's just interesting for this knee injury. Oh, we can't show it. And everybody immediately in unison put out prayers with the emojis too. Now, I understand this is the overall sentiment of people when somebody gets hurt. But there's another individual who was hurt who nobody even said, hey, kiss my ass to. And I found it very interesting. And when you look at the type of injury, it might make you wonder, maybe this is why they didn't show the replay. And then when they did, they came back 10 minutes later, oh yeah, we're going to show you the replay from the other end. It makes no sense. If you don't want people seeing the replay, you're not going to show it. But they came back and showed it from an angle where you really don't see what happens to Fitzpatrick. What I can say is I saw the play live. He was part of the tackle. Very much like Hamlin when he stood up and fell back down. Fitzpatrick didn't stand completely up. He went to get up and then went back down. Now, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but to me, the individual who was taken to the hospital is going to be the one that I think deserves the prayers. Okay, and I understand they probably took Chubb to the hospital, but one was taken there for pain issues to obviously probably get him some of the finest painkillers there are injected. I'm sure he hated that. But in all seriousness, just to make sure they knew what they were dealing with, and assuming it's a real injury. With Fitzpatrick, with a chest injury, this man could have had a mini heart attack. There are so many things that could have happened. If you notice, they're being very vague. Probably because they know they can't lie and say it was a pec tear when it wasn't. So, they're just calling it a chest injury, but fuck him, who cares about that, right? It's just a chest injury. The last time a guy had a chest injury, it wasn't that big of a deal on prime time. So, to me, it's really interesting, and I remember when it happened with DeMar, people were pointing out the time it happened and all these different things and how it was choreographed. And I don't know how they do it. I don't. Because I genuinely think there's things that they don't expect. I think Fitzpatrick is one of them. It's just very, very interesting. And they're both pit guys. So, I mean, you can see why people think it would be choreographed. But the way they immediately... And by the way, this is the third time this season. With the Lions game, the Lions are playing the Chiefs. And a guy fell down, got back up, and one of the announcers even went to say, ooh, that's scary, anytime you see that kind of hit, it brings back memories. Like, they were a little worried, I think, that we were going to have another Hamlin situation. I brought this up with Rogers. I said, what if it wasn't the Achilles? He stood up and he went back to the ground, and then he was helped off the field where it looked like he was a little woozy. And I know people brought up how he looked to the sideline at 11:19, and then he went back down. So it definitely could have been something that was, preordained. I just think it's very interesting. Now we have another safety, and I would think people would be saying, hey, this guy went to the hospital with chest injuries, prayers to him. But everybody is just wrapped up with Chubb. And that's what ESPN does. That's what these guys do. They get their top guys, your LeBron James, your Mahomes, your Lamars, your Josh Allens, your other star running backs, your Barkleys, and they're all going to put out stuff, oh man, Chubb, that was the ugliest thing I've ever seen, when we don't even see a replay. And I get some people saw the replay and said it looked ugly. Again, I go back to my wrestling argument. And again, even if it's a real injury, it doesn't negate Fitzpatrick's injury. And why didn't they show his? Why didn't they show what happened to him? Why was he conveniently missing from the replays? The replays were void of Minkah Fitzpatrick, and it was just showing this side angle with Nick Chubb and him lying there, and then him getting carted off the field. Again, we don't know what happened with Fitzpatrick. For all we know, he was on a defibrillator. Like, we honestly don't know. We know it was bad enough of a chest injury for him to have to go to the hospital. So we'll have to see what they say with him. They didn't see, as you can see, he jogged off on his own power, they're saying. So, and it says he checked on Chubb. I think that's just, again, them trying to show, oh no, Chubb is the real injury here. But they didn't act like it was a situation like Buffalo-Cincinnati, obviously. But they still were very suspicious. And they immediately, I knew they were full of crap when they said, oh yeah, we're not going to show the replay. Because, A, you can kind of tell by the tone of somebody's voice. And it was more of a stern, we're not going to show this replay, versus a sympathetic, oh, we shouldn't show this replay. And then they came back and showed it immediately after, which makes no sense. They just showed it from a different angle. And again, it just, outside of seeing the actual hit, we just didn't see Minkah Fitzpatrick and really what could have hurt him. Of course, he was in on the tackle, but it was much like a DeMar situation, in my opinion. So, like I said, this is a few times now this has happened. Obviously, Bronny's is different because his was during a practice. We don't know if he took a hit or not. But this is another primetime game. And like I said, it happened earlier this year, like a week ago. It was only week 1. I think it was a Lions player. And he took that kind of a hit, and they were silent for a second, like, oh no, hopefully it doesn't happen again. So I think it's incredibly interesting, and the numbers are always interesting. I went into how Pickett finishes with 222 yards and 2 sacks for 22 yards. Like, those things aren't even possible. And I was just reading this article because I was perusing some articles, as I always do, just after the games. And I noticed Fitzpatrick being buried, like a lot of other guys get buried. And I thought the Chubb love was overkill. We have a lot of guys who get their seasons cut short, and they don't get this. And I know if the injury looked ugly, I get it, but we just saw Hunter, in my opinion, whenever it's a head, or even in that area, neck, head, I'm not sure exactly where the injury was to. He was hit pretty high up. Sanders was hit in the head and the face. It was like a face mask to the helmet. But in my opinion, when you have certain people just getting buried, and again, a chest injury that takes you to the hospital is a big deal. I think it should be being talked about, and I think there's a reason that they're not bringing this up. So we'll see if this is more of things to come. We'll definitely notice, because we're going to see if it is a lot of injuries, quote injuries, where they don't show the actual injury, or they're very suspicious about it, like tonight, or they overreact to one guy when 2 guys were taken out of the game from the injury. We'll have to see how long Fitzpatrick is out. He might be out for a few weeks. Who knows? Maybe we see him return, and play better than ever. You never know. I'm still very skeptical about the whole Hamlin thing. Nothing they showed me makes me believe that the original story of him dying on the field isn't true. So, again, that's just my opinion, because that is their report. They reported it, and then they just really walked it back by saying, oh yeah, within minutes the CPR team had him back to normal. Well, that's not true. They said it themselves. They had the machines out, they weren't working. So they're going to quickly change the stories. I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow they say Fitzpatrick had a shoulder injury instead, just to get it off the chest. But I find it very interesting, and I'm very curious where they go with this. I bet you in a couple days they won't be saying a word about Nick Chubb, because the bigger scare of Fitzpatrick will have been at the back of people's minds. So we'll see if they keep up this energy for Chubb. You would think, whether it's the day it happened or 2 days later, they would still say, hey man, we're with you for the recovery process. You're in our prayers. Or we'll see if it falls off a map and they just jump on and cling on to the next. You have to understand, these are people. They're supposed to be people. The odds of all of them tweeting the exact same thing, prayers with the prayer emoji, it's just very... And of course you're going to be saying something to that effect, but at the same time. But they don't do it for other guys. And they didn't say a word about Fitzpatrick. You have to understand, the odds of that. You don't think one guy would have said... One guy on the Steelers did, actually, a former Steeler. It might have been JJ. JJ Watt basically said... I know he was a Texan. Maybe he wasn't a Steeler. But anyway, his brother's a Steeler. And he said, basically at the very end, I hope Minkah's okay too. Something very, very vague. But nobody else was really talking about Minkah. So, to me, that was very interesting. I wanted to get this out because... As you know, more important than beating Vegas, I always like to go into what I think is the deeper corruption. And there's a lot of chest injuries, and we haven't been getting them before. So, people can think what they want, but this is a lot of times now that we're seeing this in a very short period. And I'm curious, going forward, if we start seeing it happen more often. And I'm curious what the coverage on Fitzpatrick's going to be, if they're going to talk about it at all, or what they're going to do, because I find the whole thing very, very interesting. So, yeah, I'm curious to see what happens. You can get chest injury, took him to the hospital, but screw him. Another guy, after getting the bag, hurt his knee. So, the whole world must forget about Fitzpatrick and only dedicate our energy to Chubb. And again, real or fake, say Chubb really got hurt. I'm not trying to be insensitive. I'm just trying to be fair to both players. And when I see athletes coming out like this, just being so biased towards one guy, especially when it's coming to injuries, I just find it very, very interesting, and it seems like they're trying to negate from another narrative. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if the chest injuries, anything, if they expound on it at all. And if they expound on Chubb, I'm curious to see the energy going forward. But to me, the immediate indicator was when they didn't show the replay. A naive person would say, well, they just care about us. And they care about his family. Well, again, these people exploited Theismann's injury. These people will exploit anything for ratings. They don't care about Nick Chubb, I guarantee you that. So I don't think that was the reason. Maybe if it was a head injury, I could see it. I could see why they wouldn't show Fitzpatrick. A chest injury is scary. So again, very interesting. I just thought the whole thing was a decoy. And then I read about the chest injury. So it wasn't like I was already looking for stuff. I thought the non-showing of the replay and then the weird way they showed it was very suspect. I thought the immediate outpouring before there was even an x-ray was very suspect. You see hard hits all the time. You really don't know what it is until it happens. And what's even weirder, and I don't want to dig too much, but I can say for a fact, and I know anyone that watched this live will say it, with that type of injury, if it was that bad, I don't know why he would have moved. He was rolling around like a typical player does after he's hurt, or after he's hit. He kind of rolls to his back, goes to get up, and then suddenly he rolled back to his stomach and started writhing in pain. So maybe he saw Fitzpatrick and was like, uh-oh. No, I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just saying it's pretty interesting the amount of injuries this year that have been chest related, or just a guy dropping and they're not really explaining why. Again, with Rodgers, I still hold off my theory that maybe it wasn't the ankle. They had teased it coming in, his calf's hurt. And then when he just went back down the second time on his own volition, and it looked like he was being helped to the sideline because he was woozy. Well, he walked to the sideline, then he was being helped to the back. Looked like because he was woozy. I thought, maybe that wasn't the ankle at all, and they have to find other ways to describe these injuries. So, prayers to Fitzpatrick, because he's the one that, knee injury, 0% chance of dying. Chest injury, probably at least a 1% chance of dying. So my prayers are going to Fitzpatrick because he's the only one that has an injury that could damage vital organs, muscles, and cause the heart to do things that the heart's not supposed to be doing. So I feel bad for Chubb and his knee, but to me this is the bigger issue, and I find it very interesting that it's not been talked about. They just threw it in here, as the secondary injury. So we'll have to see what happens, but I thought people would be interested in seeing this because I know people are on both sides of the fence. I know a lot of people saw it and they're like, nope, this was real, has to be. And I'm not saying it can't be. I'm just saying with the benefit of choreographed replay and the best technology and pads and equipment in the world, if wrestlers can do it with no knee pads, these guys can do it with knee pads and all this stuff. So I wouldn't buy it so quickly, but I would look into Fitzpatrick. I'm curious what's going to happen to him in the next couple days. So take care, everybody, and happy earnings.